In the grand scheme of interstellar politics, humanity was supposed to be a footnote, a curious bipedal species from a backwater solar system that somehow managed to achieve faster-than-light travel before obliterating themselves. The betting pools across 17 sentient civilizations had overwhelmingly favored self-annihilation. Trillions of credits changed hands when humans not only survived their technological adolescence, but arrived on the galactic stage with a peculiar mix of wide-eyed wonder and battle-hardened pragmatism. The year 2287 marked humanity's centennial of interstellar citizenship. 100 years of careful diplomacy, strategic alliances, and the occasional display of martial prowess when absolutely necessary. Humans had carved out a modest but respectable position among the stars. 27 colonies across 4 spiral arms, trade agreements with the major powers, and a defensive fleet that punched well above its tonnage. The Galactic Concord, that loose confederation of species bound by mutual economic interests and the shared desire not to be eaten by their neighbors, had initially viewed humans as an amusing curiosity. The Kelvashi, with their hive-mind consciousness spread across billions of crystalline bodies, found human individuality both fascinating and inefficient. The Morrigan Collective, ancient and patient, appreciated humanity's creative arts while dismissing their political structures as ephemeral. The Zenth Republic, closest to humans in biology if not temperament, became reluctant trading partners after discovering humanity's inexplicable talent for cultivating luxury foodstuffs that appealed to Zenth palates. Then there were the Vexari, 6 limbs, chitinous exoskeletons, and a societal structure built entirely around territorial expansion. The Vexari Imperium had been the neighborhood bully for 12,000 years. They weren't the oldest or most technologically advanced civilization, but they were unquestionably the most aggressive. Their philosophy was simple: territory equals security equals survival. The fact that 17 other species had to share the galaxy with them was, from the Vexari perspective, an unfortunate biological accident that would eventually be corrected. Nova Haven was humanity's newest colony, a lush garden world orbiting a stable G-type star just 30 light-years from Earth. Rich in rare minerals and blessed with Earth-compatible biology, it represented humanity's most ambitious colonization effort to date. 10 million settlers, state-of-the-art infrastructure, and enough agricultural capacity to feed 3 times its population. It also happened to sit on what the Vexari considered their natural expansion corridor toward the galactic core. They want us to what? Admiral Eliza Blackwood's voice remained steady, but the temperature in the command center of the UES Indomitable seemed to drop several degrees. Fleet Intelligence Officer Ravi Kapoor cleared his throat. Evacuate Nova Haven within 30 standard days. They're claiming prior territorial rights based on a survey mission from 3,000 years ago. A survey mission. Not a colony. Not an outpost. Not even a permanent beacon. Blackwood's gray eyes narrowed as she studied the holographic display of the sector. And if we refuse? The Vexari High Command states they will remove the infestation through appropriate means. The bridge fell silent. Everyone present understood the Vexari definition of appropriate means. Their cleansing of the torrid settlements 50 years earlier had left 3 habitable worlds sterilized down to the microbial level. What the Vexari didn't understand, what most non-human species failed to grasp, was that humanity's relatively peaceful integration into galactic society wasn't due to weakness or timidity. It was a choice, a preference, not a limitation. High Commander Kralthax of the Vexari Expansion Fleet had studied human military history extensively. He'd analyzed their weapons capabilities, fleet movements, and defensive postures. What he hadn't studied was their literature, particularly the ancient texts on warfare from figures like Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, or Machiavelli. He hadn't immersed himself in human entertainment media that glorified the underdog, the guerrilla fighter, the reluctant warrior pushed too far. Most critically, he hadn't internalized a fundamental truth about humans, their remarkable capacity to compartmentalize violence. Humans didn't lack ferocity. They contained it, channeled it, regulated it through elaborate social and legal constructs. The mistake most species made was assuming these constructs were permanent. "Open a direct channel to Earth Central Command," Admiral Blackwood ordered, her posture shifting subtly from concerned to predatory. "And prepare a priority message to Nova Haven. Tell Governor Okafor that evacuation is not, I repeat, not being considered. The diplomatic corps is requesting to handle initial response," Kapoor noted. Blackwood's smile didn't reach her eyes. "By all means, let them try the reasonable approach first, but also inform Strategic Command that we're initiating Protocol Thermopylae." A ripple of tension passed through the bridge crew. Protocol. Thermopylae had never been implemented outside of simulations. It was the contingency plan for when humanity needed to send a message that would echo across the stars for generations. "Admiral," her XO, Commander Jackson Okonkwo, spoke quietly at her side. "Once we initiate Thermopylae, there's no going back. The conquered might view it as excessive." "The conquered isn't facing extinction on Nova Haven," Blackwood replied, "and someone needs to teach the Vexari that threatening a human colony comes with consequences they haven't begun to imagine." The concept of rules of war struck most galactic civilizations as an oxymoron. The Zenth viewed conflict as a biological imperative requiring total commitment. The Kelvashi considered warfare a mathematical equation where efficiency was the only relevant variable. The Morrigan Collective simply refused to acknowledge distinctions between combatants and non-combatants, viewing each species as a single organism regardless of individual components. Humans, paradoxically, had developed the most extensive ethical frameworks for their most unethical activity. The Geneva Conventions, the Hague Regulations, the Martian Accords, the Titan Protocols, layer upon layer of restrictions on humanity's own capacity for violence, self-imposed limitations that baffled their interstellar neighbors. They restrict themselves when they could win more decisively? High Commander Kralthax had asked his xenopsychology advisor during their initial briefing on human warfare doctrine. This confirms their fundamental weakness. The advisor, older and considerably more cautious, had attempted to explain. "Sir, these restrictions appear to be conditional. Historical records suggest." "Historical records show they haven't fought a proper war in over a century," Kralthax interrupted, his secondary mandibles clicking in dismissal. "Their colonies are lightly defended, their fleet is dispersed across 4 spiral arms, and their ground forces lack recent combat experience. The human threat assessment remains minimal." 3 days after the Vexari ultimatum, the Galactic Concord convened an emergency session. The diplomatic corps of Earth presented their case methodically. Historical precedent, colonization rights, the substantial investment in Nova Haven, and the disproportionate nature of the Vexari threat. The Vexari ambassador, Drac Moore, remained unmoved. "The territorial claim of the Imperium predates human spaceflight by millennia. Your ignorance of our prior claim does not invalidate it. The deadline stands. What happened next would be replayed on information networks across the galaxy for decades to come." Admiral Blackwood, attending as Earth's military representative, requested permission to address the Concord directly, an unusual move that violated diplomatic protocol. The United Earth government has authorized me to present our formal response to the Vexari ultimatum, she began, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had spent decades making life-or-death decisions. Nova Haven will not be evacuated, not in 30 days, not ever. Drakmore's feeding tentacles writhed in agitation. Then, you have chosen extinction. No, Blackwood replied, her expression unnervingly calm. We've chosen to inform the Vexari Imperium that any hostile action against Nova Haven will be considered an act of total war against humanity. And in the event of total war, the restrictions of the Geneva Convention and subsequent human warfare protocols will no longer apply to our response. The chamber erupted in multilingual chaos. The concept that humans had been voluntarily restraining their military capabilities, and might choose to stop doing so, sent ripples of alarm through the assembly. The Morrigan representative, a towering figure of shifting shadows, leaned forward. Clarify, no longer apply. Admiral Blackwood's response was measured, but chilling. It means that if the Vexari attack Nova Haven, humanity will respond with every means at our disposal, without limitation on targets, methods, or scope. It means we will no longer distinguish between military assets and civilian infrastructure. It means we will not stop until the threat is permanently eliminated. You would abandon your cherished ethical framework so easily, asked the Kelvashi representative, crystal facets flashing in apparent distress. There's nothing easy about it, Blackwood answered. For centuries, we've chosen to fight with one hand tied behind our back. We've done this not from weakness, but because we fear what we become when both hands are free. The recording ended there in most public broadcasts, but the classified continuation included Blackwood's final statement. The Vexari should ask themselves a simple question. If humans created such extensive rules to limit our capacity for violence, what exactly were we trying to contain? High Commander Kralthax dismissed the human's speech as empty posturing. 5 Vexari battle groups began moving toward Nova Haven the following day, while their propaganda networks broadcast images of previous cleansing operations as a warning to the human colonists. Commander Darius Frost received his orders aboard the stealth frigate UES Phantom. A former special operations officer with a reputation for unorthodox tactics, Frost had been recruited specifically for Protocol Thermopylae years earlier. His 12-person team represented the elite of human military capability, specialists in everything from xenobiology to quantum sabotage. Our objective is not to win battles, Frost told his team during their mission briefing. Our objective is to ensure that generations of Vexari will warn their hatchlings about the consequences of threatening humans. The first indication that the Vexari had catastrophically miscalculated came when their forward scout vessels suddenly lost contact with the fleet. Not through conventional jamming or destruction, they simply ceased to exist in any detectable form. The second indication came when the environmental systems on 3 Vexari colony worlds simultaneously recalibrated to produce air with 0.02% hydrogen sulfide. Not enough to kill, but enough to induce widespread illness and panic. The third indication arrived when Kralthax received a secure transmission containing detailed personal information about his 14 offspring, including their current locations, daily routines, and real-time video feeds of them going about their activities, completely unaware they were being watched. How? He demanded of his security chief. How did they penetrate our most secure facilities? Before the security chief could respond, every communication device in the command center activated simultaneously, broadcasting Admiral Blackwood's voice. This is just the beginning, Commander Kralthax. You threatened a human colony. Now learn what that means. The incident at Proxima Station marked the moment when the galaxy truly began to fear what they had unleashed. The Vexari's primary forward operating base, a massive orbital platform housing 20,000 military personnel and their support infrastructure, experienced what official reports later termed a catastrophic cognitive event. No physical weapons were deployed. No human ships approached within a light year. Yet at precisely 03:17 Standard Time, every Vexari on the station simultaneously experienced the same hallucination: that their exoskeletons were dissolving, their internal organs liquefying, their nervous systems firing random signals of excruciating pain. The mass panic resulted in self-inflicted injuries as personnel clawed at their own bodies, convinced they were melting from the inside out. When rescue teams arrived 12 hours later, they found no physical cause. The station's environmental systems showed no contaminants. Medical scans revealed no pathogens. The only anomaly was a subtle electromagnetic signature pulsing through the station's communication network, a signature that matched the specific resonance frequency of the Vexari central nervous system. "They weaponized fear itself," reported the Zenth observer to the Galactic Concord, without firing a single shot. Kralthax, watching the medical evacuation from his flagship, felt something he hadn't experienced since his larval stage: doubt. His intelligence officers had no explanation for how humans had discovered the neurological resonance frequency, information the Vexari themselves had only uncovered a decade earlier and kept strictly classified. The Nova Haven Defense Fleet consists of only 7 warships, his tactical officer reminded him. Our main battle group outnumbers them 6-1. Whatever psychological tactics they're employing, superior firepower will prevail. Kralthax wasn't so certain anymore. 3 of his scout ships had vanished without trace. Colony worlds thousands of light-years from the conflict zone had been infiltrated with surgical precision. And now Proxima Station, his forward command center, had been neutralized without a direct confrontation. "They're not fighting according to any recognized doctrine," he muttered, mandibles clicking in agitation. "Where is their fleet? Where are their main forces?" The answer came 5 days later at Epsilon Ridge, a dense asteroid field marking the approach to Nova Haven. The Vexari battle group entered the field in standard combat formation, sensors at maximum sensitivity, weapons charged. For 3 hours, they navigated the gravitational maze without incident. Then the asteroids began to move, not randomly, with purpose. Hundreds of the larger bodies suddenly altered course, their trajectories forming an intricate, 3-dimensional net closing around the Vexari formation. Scans revealed the truth too late. What appeared to be natural asteroids were in fact engineered constructs, massive engines and minimal control systems attached to genuine space rock, creating weaponized celestial bodies. "Evasive maneuvers," Kralthax ordered, but the gravitational distortions were already disrupting their navigation systems. The first impacts began moments later, not high-velocity collisions that would destroy both target and projectile, but precisely calculated nudges that sent Vexari ships careening into each other or into genuine asteroids. As his fleet struggled to regroup, a new threat emerged. Microscopic clouds of what sensors identified as smart dust enveloped Vexari vessels. The particles, each a tiny machine no larger than a bacterium, infiltrated ship systems through external sensor arrays and atmospheric intakes. Once inside, they assembled themselves into more complex structures, targeting critical systems with impossible precision. "They've turned the environment itself against us," Kralthax's science officer reported, mandibles trembling. "These aren't conventional weapons. They're weaponized engineering." The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than an hour. When it ended, the Vexari had lost 43 ships, with another 17 rendered combat ineffective. The human Nova Haven defense fleet remained in orbit around their colony world, having never moved from their position. Across the galaxy, military analysts struggled to comprehend what they were witnessing. The Kelvashi, with their hive mind processing capabilities, were the first to articulate the disturbing reality. The humans aren't fighting a war, their representative announced to the Galactic Concord. They're conducting a demonstration. Admiral Blackwood confirmed this assessment during her next transmission to the Vexari High Command. The message was brief. You've now seen a fraction of our capability. The smart dust that disabled your ships could have disassembled your crews, molecule by molecule. The gravitational manipulators could have compressed your vessels into artificial diamonds. We chose restraint. Next time, we won't. The most alarming development for non-human observers wasn't the technology itself, though the level of advancement shocked even the Morrigan Collective. It was the revelation that humans had apparently maintained multiple secret military research programs, despite centuries of supposed transparency. The implications were staggering. What else were they hiding? Commander Frost's team, meanwhile, executed the psychological component of Protocol Thermopylae with surgical precision. Using data gathered from compromised Vexari networks, they crafted personalized psychological warfare campaigns targeting key military and political leaders. Some received evidence that their mates were engaging in genetic infidelity. Others discovered their offspring had been secretly converted to forbidden philosophical movements. High-ranking officials found their private financial transactions mysteriously public. We're not just fighting their ships, Frost explained to his team. We're fighting their society's cohesion, their certainty, their faith in their own systems. The Vexari, a species that had evolved from ambush predators, had always relied on being the unseen threat, the lurking danger. Now they experienced what it meant to be the hunted, to know that invisible eyes were watching, that nowhere was truly secure, that attack could come in forms they couldn't predict or defend against. When the experimental human technology designated Nemesis was finally revealed, even humanity's allies requested emergency distance from Earth colonies. The system, a network of quantum-entangled particles that could theoretically transmit effects instantaneously across any distance, demonstrated its capability by simultaneously deactivating the artificial gravity on every Vexari warship within 50 light-years of Nova Haven. The coordination required for such an action defied conventional physics. "This isn't possible," Kralthax whispered, as he floated helplessly in his command center, watching reports of the same phenomenon affecting ships that should have been beyond any conceivable range of influence. No species has mastered quantum-scale manipulation at this level. The message from Admiral Blackwood that followed was simple. Now, do you understand what you've awakened? Kralthax's final stand occurred not in the vacuum of space or the stratosphere of Nova Haven, but in the sterile confines of Diplomatic Suite 7 aboard the Galactic Concord's neutral station. His once imposing frame seemed diminished, his exoskeleton dulled from stress hormones, his secondary mandibles unnaturally still. Across the table sat Admiral Blackwood, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her uniform conspicuously free of weapons. The contrast wasn't lost on the observers. The military commander who had orchestrated the most devastating psychological campaign in recent galactic history appeared completely ordinary, almost gentle in her demeanor. "You could have destroyed us completely," Kralthax stated, not a question, but an acknowledgement. Your nemesis system alone could have targeted our biological functions rather than our ship systems. Blackwood nodded once. Yes. Then why this meeting? Why offer terms when total victory was within your grasp? The Admiral's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind her eyes. Perhaps sadness, perhaps something older and more primal. Because the purpose of war isn't extermination, Commander. It's to achieve political objectives when other methods fail. Our objective was never your destruction. It was ensuring the safety of Nova Haven and establishing a precedent that human colonies are not viable targets. The Vexari commander's compound eyes studied her with new comprehension. You exercised restraint even after abandoning your conventions. We abandoned the restrictions on our methods, not the underlying principles that guided their creation, Blackwood corrected. The difference may seem academic to you, but it's fundamental to us. What followed was not a traditional surrender, but something the galaxy had never witnessed before, a mutual recognition protocol. The Vexari formally acknowledged humanity's right to maintain and defend Nova Haven. Humanity, in turn, agreed to establish a joint scientific outpost on the planet's smaller continent, where Vexari researchers could study the world's unique biochemistry. Their original interest in the system before territorial ambitions took precedence. The political fallout across the galactic concord was immediate and far-reaching. Species that had dismissed humans as diplomatic lightweights suddenly sought preferential trade agreements. Military alliances were proposed, then hastily withdrawn when Earth representatives gently suggested that humanity preferred to maintain its independent defense posture. Most significantly, the Galactic Concord convened a special session to draft what would eventually be known as the Human Clause in interstellar conflict regulations. The clause formally recognized that certain species might operate under self-imposed ethical restrictions during peacetime and limited conflicts, but reserved the right to remove these restrictions when facing existential threats. The Morrigan representative, during a private conversation with Admiral Blackwood, expressed what many species were thinking. You've created a situation where the threat of what you might do becomes more powerful than any weapon you could actually deploy. Blackwood's response became legendary in diplomatic circles. That was always the point of the Geneva Convention. Not to make war more humane, though that was a benefit, but to create a framework where the most terrible weapons remain sheathed through mutual understanding of the consequences of drawing them. On Nova Haven itself, life returned to something resembling normalcy with remarkable speed. Governor Okafor's administration focused on infrastructure development and integration of the new joint research facility. The colonists, who had prepared for evacuation or worse, instead found themselves the focus of galactic attention, a living symbol of humanity's unexpected rise to major power status. Commander Frost and his team received no public recognition for their role in Protocol Thermopylae. Their unit was officially disbanded, its members reassigned to conventional posts throughout human space. Only rumors remained of their achievements, whispers of impossible infiltrations and psychological operations that defied explanation. 6 months after what historians would call the Nova Haven demonstration, Kralthax requested a final private meeting with Admiral Blackwood before his return to Vexari space. The content of their conversation remained classified, but observers noted the Vexari commander performed the rare mandible salute, a gesture of profound respect typically reserved for the Imperium's most accomplished military leaders. The true legacy of the conflict emerged in the decades that followed. Humanity, having revealed a fraction of its capabilities, found itself in the paradoxical position of needing to engage in less direct military action than ever before. The mere presence of human diplomatic representatives at negotiations was often sufficient to ensure peaceful resolutions to conflicts that might otherwise have escalated. The Kelvashi, with their gift for mathematical prediction, perhaps summarized it best in their assessment to the Galactic Concord. Humans have achieved the ultimate strategic position. Their potential for violence is so thoroughly demonstrated that they rarely need to exercise it. They have weaponized restraint itself. As for the Geneva Convention and its successors, those peculiar human inventions that had so puzzled other species, they gained new respect throughout galactic society. Several non-human civilizations began developing their own versions, recognizing that the ability to limit one's capacity for destruction was not, as previously assumed, a sign of weakness, but rather of tremendous strength and foresight. In the officers' lounge aboard the UES Indomitable, now patrolling a peaceful Nova Haven system, a junior lieutenant asked Admiral Blackwood the question that many had wondered but few had dared to voice. "Ma'am, would we really have gone through with the final phase of Thermopylae if they hadn't backed down?" Blackwood's gaze drifted to the viewport, where the blue-green jewel of Nova Haven rotated serenely below. After a long moment, she replied, "The most effective deterrent is one you never have to use, Lieutenant. But, for it to work, you must be fully prepared to use it. And your adversary must believe that, without question." She turned back to the young officer, her expression softening slightly. "The true victory isn't that we defeated the Vexari. It's that we did so while giving them a path to peace that didn't require their destruction. Because in the end, the point of having rules for warfare isn't just to limit the horror. It's to remember that even in our darkest moments, we have choices about who we become." As news of the human claws spread throughout the galaxy, species that had once viewed Earth as a minor player in cosmic affairs began to understand a fundamental truth. The most dangerous predators aren't those with the sharpest claws or the deadliest venom. They're the ones with the self-awareness to keep their weapons sheathed until absolutely necessary, and the resolve to use them without hesitation when that moment arrives. The Vexari learned this lesson at tremendous cost. The rest of the galaxy took careful notes.